Rich Dad Poor Dad has sold tens of millions of copies, and honestly, I get it. Parts of this book will genuinely change how you think about money. But here's what no one will tell you when they hand the book to you. This book was not written for somebody who just starting at zero. And if you read it without knowing that, you'll walk away inspired but pointed in the completely wrong direction. Today, I'm going to tell you what this book actually gets right, where it quietly goes wrong, and the one lesson buried deep inside that most reviews never even mention. So let's start with what Kiyosaki actually gets right. Because there's real gold in this book, it just gets buried underneath the real estate pitch. Lesson 1: broke and poor are not the same. Kiyosaki says it directly, and it's one of the most freeing ideas in the entire book. Being broke is temporary. Being poor is a mindset. You can be broke today and completely change your trajectory. But if you believe you're poor, and that becomes your identity, that belief will keep you stuck long after your bank account changes. And here's what the book doesn't say that I will. That mindset doesn't automatically leave when the money arrives. There are people out there making serious money, but who are still operating with that grind, hustle, survival mode mentality. They have nothing. Still chasing more because being poor became their identity, and that fear never went away. And that's exactly how people with resources end up making desperate decisions, sometimes ending them up in criminal situations. Broke is a bank balance. Poor is a belief system. Kiyosaki did get that part right, and the distinction matters. Lesson 2: fear and greed are running your financial life, and you don't even know it. This is the observation most people skip past because they're too focused on the real estate chapters. Kiyosaki argues the rat race isn't just a money problem, it's an emotional problem. People stay in jobs they hate because they're afraid of losing their income. And then they get a raise and immediately spend it because desire takes over. Fear, greed, fear, and more greed, back and forth, on, pulling you in opposite directions, and the cycle never breaks because nobody stops to notice what's happening. And it doesn't stop at the middle class. That same vortex, fear of losing what you have, greed chasing what you don't, that's what keeps wealthy people trapped too. Different circumstances, same cycle. He's not wrong about this one either. So lesson 3: pay yourself first. This one shows up late in the book, and most people blow right past it, chasing the real estate advice. But this single idea, when done correctly and automatically, is the closest thing to a cheat code for building actual wealth on a regular income that I have ever come across. Not a side hustle, not a business, just this. Kiyosaki introduces the concept, but he doesn't show you how to actually implement it into your life. And that gap is where most people, I think, get stuck. I'm going to come back to this at the end of the video and show you exactly what doing this looks like in real life and in practice, because this is the lesson I don't want you to miss. Now, let's talk about Poor Dad, because this is where I think Kiyosaki makes the biggest mistake, not financially, but humanly. Poor Dad is most of us. He's not a villain, and he's not exactly lazy. He did everything society told him to do. He got the education to the point of advanced degrees, worked hard, stayed loyal, and he stayed to the societal script. And for a lot of people watching this, Poor Dad isn't just a character in a book. He's somebody who you grew up with. He's someone in your family, someone who loves you and did their absolute best with what they knew. For me, it's my grandmother. She preached education, and she wasn't wrong about that. She told me to save, and she wasn't wrong about that either. She played by every rule she was ever given, and I have nothing but respect for her for that. But here's where it breaks my heart, because when I look back, there is no distinction between money just sitting and money working for you. And that one piece of missing financial education meant that she worked far longer than she should have. She truly retired from working just a handful of years ago. And I wish she would have been able to enjoy her retirement sooner while she could really take advantage of her golden years. It really just boils down to a problem with financial education. And it's the same problem that this book is trying to solve. Kiyosaki just doesn't have enough grace for the people who were failed by the system before they ever had a chance to question it. Poor Dad is a cautionary tale, but he's also a starting point. And if you see yourself or someone you love in that character, that's not something to be ashamed of. That's exactly where this conversation needs to begin. So the question is, what do we do now that we know better? Now, Rich Dad. And I want to be fair here too, because Kiyosaki clearly learned real things from this man, and the financial principles are largely sound, in my opinion. But there's something about Rich Dad that the book glosses over, and I think it matters. Rich Dad wasn't around much, and he was building wealth and building businesses, and those things take time. The book frames that as the cost of financial freedom, but I'd actually like to push back on that framing. If the goal of financial freedom is to have more time and more options, and you're spending all of it chasing more money, what exactly are you free from? Financial freedom should mean freedom to be more present, not just freedom from a paycheck. All right, so here's the bigger issue that I have with Rich Dad that the book never addresses as well. It never once asks you what financial freedom means to you. It assumes the goal is maximum wealth, more assets, more income, more businesses. But what if your version of financial freedom looks completely different? Well, the book doesn't have that conversation, but we will here. And that silence is where most people go wrong after reading this book. And not having that quiet reflection, that understanding of your goals, your life that you want, that's where most people go wrong after reading this book. So now let's talk about where this book actually goes wrong, because I promised you honesty, and this is the most part reviews skip: the real estate and entrepreneurship prescription. Kiyosaki doesn't just suggest real estate and owning a business as wealth building tools. He basically prescribes them as the only legitimate paths to building wealth. And I have a problem with that. Not because either one is bad, and both can be great ways for the right person at the right time to build massive wealth. But the right person at the right time also needs the right capital behind them. Most millionaires in this country are W-2 employees. They're W-2 millionaires. Regular people with jobs who invested and saved consistently and lived below their means. If you're building wealth on a salary right now, the book barely acknowledges that path exists. And to think about that, most Americans don't have $400 in an emergency fund. They probably don't need to hear just buy real estate to be wealthy. You need a foundation first. The book mistakes the vehicle for the principle. Here's another one: the mutual funds problem. This is the part that actually frustrated me. All right. Kiyosaki dismisses mutual funds completely in what he calls the get rich slowly approach, that they're for people who just don't know any better. And this is where the book does real damage, especially for someone who's starting at zero and gets handed this book or just picks it up off the shelf and then takes it as gospel. Index funds and low mutual funds are not the enemy. For most people on a regular income, they are the most accessible and most proven, most boring path to building wealth that ever exists. Boring works, boring compounds, boring turns into life-changing money over decades. And the data on that is pretty unambiguous. Kiyosaki's bias towards real estate and business ownership offers simple index investing doesn't just rub me the wrong way. It actively steers people away from something that works. And honestly, a lot of that requires incredible risk tolerance, a lot of capital, and honestly, a lot of things going right, being lucky to pull off in the way that he describes. And let's talk about survivorship bias for a second. The people who successfully used Kiyosaki's prescriptions or plans for his riskier strategies are the ones writing books and giving the seminars. The people who lost everything and are destitute and trying to rebuild their lives after these plays, these are the ones that we don't hear from. The people who lost everything trying to flip real estate contracts with no cushion to fall back on, they don't have the book deals. You are only hearing one side of the story, so let's just keep that in mind. Which brings me to the seminar problem. There's a chapter at the end of this book that tells you to spend money on financial education. Cool. courses, seminars, mentors. And I'm not against investing in your own financial education. But this advice is coming from the man who has built a multi-million-dollar business from books and seminars. I'm not taking that away from him, but I will say that the library is free. YouTube is free. There are tons of free podcasts out there now, and groups that have grown from those podcasts, like the Choose FI groups. You don't need to spend thousands of dollars to learn how money works anymore. Don't let anyone tell you otherwise. And this brings me to something that I want to name directly because it ties everything together. Poor Dad's mindset, the fear greed cycle, the way this book gets misread by the people who need it the most. I call it the Disney princess syndrome. You know the story. The princess is in danger, and instead of finding a way to get herself out of her situation, she waits for the prince, for the fairy godmother, for someone to come and save her. A lot of us do the exact same thing with our money. We wait for the raise or promotion that's finally going to fix everything, make everything feel lighter. We wait for the tax return. We wait for the lottery ticket that's definitely going to hit this time. This bird was talking to a squirrel and he gave me the numbers that I need this time. I got it. We keep waiting for something on the outside to save us and rescue us from our financial situation. But here's the part that's kind of hard to sit with. A lot of this danger was optional. The phone you bought on launch day, the car that was a little more than you could afford, the lifestyle that crept up slowly and you didn't notice it until you were living at or above your means. The princess didn't have to end up in the tower. This book is right that waiting to be rescued is a trap. Yes, don't wait. Where it falls short is showing you the way out, especially when you don't have the capital for real estate or the risk tolerance to start a business tomorrow. There are many paths to wealth, and this book really only explores and holds up to the pedestal, I guess, a couple of ways. Here's what I actually think the real lesson is of this book. And it's got nothing to do with real estate. Financial education is the most powerful asset you will ever own. Not property, not businesses, the knowledge of how money works and the discipline to act on that. It's what changes your trajectory. That's what this book is actually trying to say. A vehicle of real estate just kind of gets in the way, I think, of the overall message. So before you do anything else, define what you're actually building towards, because if you don't have your own answer, you'll spend your whole life chasing someone else's version of success and wondering why it never feels like enough. My version of financial independence is basically weekends on a Tuesday, slow mornings, grocery runs when there's hardly anyone at the store, working, but where it fits into my life and not where I'm trying to squeeze my life into what's left in the day after work. That vision is worth fighting for me, because my kids deserve the best version of me, not the version of me that's frustrated and broken down by something that happened at work. Work will replace me in a few months if something happened to me tomorrow. My family will feel that gap forever. Time is the most valuable resource that we all have. Don't take it for granted. Now, pay yourself first. I told you I was coming back to this one. So here it is. Before your bills, before groceries or anything, take a percentage. Let's just start with 2% of what you earn and put that aside. That gets moved. Do it automatically to your savings and then invest. If you don't know how to invest, maybe we can talk about that in a different video. Put that all towards your future self. Not what's left over at the end of the month. Because we know how that usually goes, right? Where you have too much month left at the end of the money. So on the first or on payday, before you see it and spend it, put it to the side. That one habit, automated and consistent, is how regular people on regular incomes build real wealth over time. Not by flipping real estate contracts, not by starting businesses, just by paying themselves first and letting time do the rest. Listen, you don't need a high income. You don't need a business. You don't need rich dad's connections. You just need to start and to know what you're actually building towards. Alrighty, so did you read it? What's the one lesson you're actually taking with you from this book? Drop it in the comments. And if this made you realize that common sense about money isn't that common, then go ahead and subscribe, because that's what we like to address. That's what we talk about here. Anyway, thanks for watching. I'll see you in the next one. Bye.